talk about core values, there are some great tools that we are going to be showing as well. But, I learned so much about core values from you because I struggled a lot with making decisions and feeling okay with my decision. I think that's the biggest thing. And, you would always stop me short and say, well, okay, let's back it up. And what are your core values? And I kind of would stammer a little bit and say, I'm not too sure, and you walked me through really focusing on core values. And once I had them written down and I had them in my head, it really helped me make my decisions faster, but then also feel good about my decisions. And I think that's what people struggle with a lot is when you're asked to either do something or be a part of something or help out or whatever it is, answering that yes or no. I think there's a hard struggle for people who always want to say yes, and always want to people please. But at the same time, if you do not hone in on really taking care of your energy and protecting it, you're going to run short and you're not going to be able to do what we always talk about doing, which is really impacting the world with what we are set to what we are here for, what our purpose is. So I think core values is a huge, huge topic to talk about and to really get people thinking about it if they haven't, and if they have, to just refine it. So I want you to talk us a little bit through where would somebody start in defining core values and why is it so important?
So let's start with why is it so important? Your core values are actually what I call your guiding posts. These are the things that are the priorities in your life. It's what's most important to you. And they guide how you make decisions in the things that you do, even the goals that you set. What happens to most of us is we think about values and we think, oh yeah, I kind of know my values, but they're not written down anywhere. We aren't being intentional about them every day, looking at them, reminding ourselves of them. Hopefully you get to a point where you memorize them, but still it's a daily intention to remind yourself, these are my core values. I have to make sure that everything aligns with my core values. Everything that I do today, I want to take it through that filtration system. And we were talking about that concept of a filtration system. So your core values, once you identify them, they become that filtration system so that everything that you are evaluating in your life and assessing in your life every day, you should be measuring against those core values. So they should be falling through the filtration system. And if they don't make it through, then it's a very high likelihood that it's not something you should do. Core values for me became really, really important probably about 5 years ago. I had examined core values and I thought, oh, I know what my core values are. But the reality was when I really dug deep into the work, I didn't know. And it wasn't until I became really clear on my core values that people pleasing became something that started to be less of my present and more of my past, because I was able to start saying no to things, kind of like a no, thank you for thinking about me. I value that you value me in that way, but I have to respectfully decline because I'm involved in these other things. And this doesn't quite match up with, what my values are right now. The other thing is looking at your values annually is so important because we change as we grow, as we mature, as we have life experiences, and our values will begin to shift at times. Some values never change. They are always consistent, but others will change in the list of priorities. So when you identify your values, you prioritize from 1 to 5 for your core values. And I recommend 5 core values. Some people recommend 3. So I say 5, but I also say if you'd rather identify 3 core values, that's fine. But nail down those 3 and then stick with them and then evaluate them annually to see if they've changed. So how to do that is really sitting down in some quiet time alone if possible,
Mhm.
and really thinking about what is important to me. What is it that I really want in my life? How is it that I want to behave? This, maybe this is something that's really important, but I haven't been consistent in the behavior. Um, really examining all of those things. And there's a series of questions that you can ask yourself. And I didn't even get into the questions in the group. This is like really deeper training that we'll make available at some time in the future. But right now, just know that there are some questions that you can begin to ask yourself around what's important, what tends to show up frequently. I know, Natalie, when you and I were talking about your core values, and it kind of became instead of an accountability session one morning, it turned into a bit of a coaching session. And I said, I think these things are your core values. Do you agree? And you were like, wait a minute, I never thought about that before. But I think you're right. And so you went off and you spent more time around that. And I kind of gave you some things to look at. And you came back and you were like, you're right. And what I loved was the confidence that I saw in you once you nailed down your core values. And you kind of said to me transparently, I'm still memorizing them. That's okay. At least you know them now. And because you know them, you're going to refer to them consistently, whether it's memorized or whether it's written down. You're going to say, wait a minute, someone asked me to do something. Does this align with my core values? Or wait a minute, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Is this really something I need to do? Does it align with my core values? And the beauty of identifying core values is that once you have those locked in, and one thing that we'll talk about in the future also is your purpose statement. When you have those things locked in, setting your goals become really easy. And because your goals are attached to your values, you have an understanding of why you are going after those goals. And so you're able to stay in the game and stay persistent even when things get challenging. So.
And I love that. And one thing that I did pick up on both your training in our group as well as what you said today is one of the biggest ways that you responded was thank you for valuing me. And you gave that impression of, rather than just saying, okay, no, I know what my core values are. Nope, sorry, not doing it, and just kind of being abrupt, because there's a way that you can do that. But you instead said, I appreciate you for thinking that I could be able to do this, but I'm not able to do this at this time, and you reframed it a little bit softer in the fact that I think that the person or the organization or whatever it is that is asking you for this particular help might understand a little bit better as well. So it was the way that you reframed how you said the decline of whether or not you are going to be doing something or not. And I think that's a huge thing, is how you say something, even though you know it, but then taking a step back and saying, okay, how can I say it in a way that I do really appreciate that they valued me enough to ask me to do this, but I unfortunately will have to decline, and that's huge. I think that's a really big thing to point out as well. Going back to the how, I loved how you also talked about, there's a list of words that we can put up here. I think I'm going to share it here. And there's a list of values for people that, hopefully don't even know where to start. This is something that we were able to. Sorry, I'm going to just get to this. Okay. So this was something that we were able to give out in our mailing list.
I think we send it out to the mailing list? I know that we put it in the group.
Yep. Okay. And then also you had posted it in our group as well. But these are a lot of words here. And I know it can be overwhelming for some people. But again, talk us through, the filtration system. I loved how when you are sitting and quiet, because that's obviously step one of being able to just figure out some of these words that are so important to you. But you kind of, the thing that I really liked was you said, okay, let's just look through a list of words, and you can Google these words, right? Anything that you want. I'm just going to kind of keep going through this. But you said pick 20, walk away. That was the one thing I loved is you said pause and walk away. All right. So talk us through this next step of doing something before, kind of get this into that filtration system that you talked about.
So the reason why I say walk away is because it's so hard, picking your values, especially narrowing them down to 5 core values or 3 or 4, whatever you decide on, is not easy. And that was one of the first things that I realized. I was in a session at a Steve Harvey conference in Miami, and they took us through, this was in the evening, and it was a bonus session, and they took us through looking at our values. And I had done this exercise before. And what I remembered most was, man, every time I do this, I hate doing this because I can't narrow it down. And they talked about how it was so important to narrow it down. So I finally forced myself, okay, I'm going to do this. But I went through and I looked and I chose, I think it was 20 that I initially chose. And then they had us get up and exercise a little bit and then go back. And then, so, the idea being get those brain juices flowing, take a moment away from it, and then go back and look. And what I didn't say on the training, but this was the intention of the pause, was to go back after you've taken a moment and look at those 20. And do you still feel the same way that you did when you selected the 20? If you don't, then it's kind of, you need to keep going through this process. And I didn't mention that in the training either, but that is what happens. You go through, you pick 20, and then assuming you're okay with the 20 when you come back, then you're going to narrow that list down from 20 to 10. So removing half of those items that you have as your values, as you can imagine, it's very, very hard because you feel as though you're being forced to choose between several things that are important to you. And I'm going to tell you, you are. It's not easy work. And I like to acknowledge that, because a lot of coaches will look at it and say, you've got to go through and identify your values. And they make it seem like it's so easy. It's not easy. It takes time to really sit down with yourself and to narrow down to core values. And, like, for example, when I talk about my core values, health is not on my list of core values. It's actually now the number 2 item on my supporting values. And if we can go into that a little bit further with supporting values, but it's not that health isn't important to me. It is important to me. But when I am making decisions, life decisions, the question becomes, let's say, so on my list, my number 1 is my faith and my relationship with God. My second one is love. And then my third one is family. And my fourth is, why am I not remembering my fourth at the moment? Time freedom, sorry. And then my fifth one is knowledge. Now, people hear that and they're like, well, how come money isn't in there? Or how come health isn't in there? Those things are on my supporting list, which is another 5 values. It's not that they're not important, but when I am comparing going after money versus loving God, loving people, and loving my family, or doing things related to my faith, doing things related to loving others and giving back to the world, or loving my family and giving time to my family, it comes lower on the list. And that's what identifying core values is all about. You've got to be real and honest with yourself. And you have to say, okay, if I am confronted with this decision, which one am I going to make? So I used in the training the example of family and work. And a lot of people will automatically say, family is my priority. I'm going to choose family. But how many people say that? And then when their kid has something going on at school, COVID, but when they had something going on at school, they dropped everything with work and went to to listen or participate in what was going on at school. The reality is a lot of those people chose work over their kids. Mm-hmm. Didn't mean that they love their kids less. It just meant that their priorities were different. And it meant that they weren't being honest with themselves when they said that their family was
first. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
and there's no right or wrong answer. The biggest thing is you have to be honest with yourself, because again, we're talking about decisions that are going to come up all the time.
Yes.
And once you identify and once you live by these core values and these supporting values, then it makes sense of why you're making decisions, and it makes the decision-making process a lot easier. And I think, and that burden and that weight, that I always felt, always making the decision, but not knowing why, and then feeling bad after, like all of that's gone. All of that is gone if you just do this work, right? And I love how you broke it down, just like how our last month, but with goal setting and breaking it out down into, smaller pieces, but breaking down the process into smaller pieces of, sitting in quiet. I'm going to put these back up, sitting in quiet and asking what's important to you. Going through a word list like we showed, and picking, words or values that you can think of that might be a lot, but then taking that break, then you pause and you walk away. Then you kind of come back and you narrow it down to maybe 10 of your top that you can choose. And then instead of having to memorize 10, because I doubt that there's going to be a lot of people who have 10 core values, but really narrowing it down to then the 5 core values, and then keeping those other 5 as supporting values that are to your main core values, allows you to have this. But again, I think that the supporting values is huge, which I, again, didn't know about being able to have. And then it helps you make sense, again, of these decisions that are put forth in front of you almost daily, I feel, And
it helps you to feel good about your decisions. You're not depriving yourself of what's important for your own priorities. And you are choosing to participate or say yes to things that align with what is important to you, because that's the problem. When we choose to say yes to something and it doesn't align with our core values, we're incongruent. And the moment we are incongruent, our brain and our hearts can't get it together, right? We're like, well, I did the right thing, right? And then you begin to question yourself, question your decision, question your motives. And then there are times where you also begin to feel not only regret, but resentment. And really, we project resentment to other people because we've said yes to something, when in fact we need to hold ourselves responsible. Because had we made sure that our decision aligned with our values, then we never would have put ourselves in that position to begin with. And I know I've been in that position a lot in the past. And I found myself resenting other people, like, why did they use me that way? And then I discovered, no, I allowed that to happen.
I let that person do that.
Yes. And the moment there's a level of freedom that comes with this, because the moment you know your core values, you're solid on them, it's freedom and confidence. You can answer confidently now. No, thank you. That's not something that I can do at this time. I appreciate you for asking and valuing me that way. And there are times where people aren't going to be happy, but you can't please everyone. But you can make sure that you are honoring yourself and staying true to your values.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I love this topic only because I was able to walk through it with you, and it's very important to me now. I love that we get to talk about this and teach other people about it as well. I know next week our topic is surrounding yourself with the right people. And again, this goes back to core values as well, what we talked about today. So I'm excited to talk more about that because, for people who, I love the phrase surround yourself with great people, but I love the phrase even more, surround yourself with the right people. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more and dive into that as well next
I
time.
am too. And I just want to say, and when we dive into that, this idea of core values will come up again, because then it's not just understanding your core values, it's understanding the core values of the people that you surround yourself with.
Yes, that's so true. Oh, I'm so excited for
Us
next
too.
week. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we are going to sign off. But hopefully, you've learned something. Put up in the comments if you have any questions, or if you want to contact us, or have maybe comments about what you walk through and what your core values are. We would love to learn about them as well. So put them in the comments so that we can engage with you, even if you're watching this on the replay. And we're so glad to be here every week with you. And we will see you next week with our new topic. So with that, we'll say goodbye.
Bye, everyone.